Very strong.
Is this working? Hi, my name's Sherry, and I'm a sugaraholic. I've been clean and sober for 17 hours. At the worst of my sugar addiction, I was twice my size. Not 10'4", I haven't had a massive height reduction, in case you were wondering. I used to start off the morning with half a liter of Sara Lee Ultra Chocolate ice cream. I know some of you are thinking, how did you stop at half a liter? Yeah, strong is my last name, not my nature, I can tell you. So sugar was, in many ways, it was my best friend and my worst enemy. And the weight wasn't the worst part of my life, that weight. It was the weight on my shoulders and my heart and in my body, and waking up with no energy after sometimes 10 hours of sleep, sickness and pain in my body, migraine headaches, and not feeling like I wanted to live. I was so depressed, I really did contemplate taking my life. And that all changed when I got off of sugar. And it's one of the things that makes a difference in our lives as far as health and wellness and nutrition. Sugar really is kind of the linchpin of what I call the lethal recipe. And the lethal recipe is how we are actually refining our foods into drugs. And we know now that sugar is just like a drug. In fact, it lights up the brain's dopamine receptors 8 times more than cocaine. And it's responsible for over 146 diseases and conditions, including heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and cancer. It's a linchpin in all of those conditions. And Alzheimer's. They're calling Alzheimer's diabetes of the brain. So the sugar that we're having, even 30 years before Alzheimer's symptoms are picked up, can actually be germinating in your brain. So when it comes to actually making those changes, what happened for me is I made a decision, definitely, to start to look at my relationship with food, because I actually dieted my way to twice my size. Sounds counterintuitive, but diets have a 95% failure rate. And I couldn't figure out why every time I went on a diet, I went up a dress size. Until I started to understand what I was actually doing with food and my relationship with food. So I found out that I was eating drugs, and I was an addict, like a drug addict. And when I started to actually deal with how do we deal with drug addicts, telling someone who's obese to just go on a diet or stop eating in a certain way is like going down to the downtown east side and saying, hey guys, stop taking drugs, here's an apple. It's a way more complex situation than that. And so I did a little bit of preparation for Man Talks. I was thinking I often speak to women, and I speak from a woman's perspective, obviously. And I thought, well, I'll do a little bit of research. So I thought I'll get into the man mindset a little bit. So I used Andy, who's my videographer, his man pen. He has this fantastic man pen. It's got like a level in it, and it's got measurements and a little toolkit inside, and it writes beautifully well. And then I thought, well, that's not enough. So I decided to watch Joe Rogan Podcast. So I watched like about 11 Joe Rogan podcasts, and I thought, I'm really getting the mindset of a man. Yeah. And then I stopped shaving, like for a week. Yeah, I thought, I'm starting to feel it. And then I thought, well, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go out into the woods and make a fire. So I went out into the woods and I made fire, and I tried to pee standing up. Okay, it was messy. I really don't understand the whole thing about it, why it's so popular, but okay, so definitely a reason why women sit down. So as far as the relationship that we have to food, men and women, we do it slightly differently. Men tend to have a much more direct relationship with food, and they start to break down things in very definitive kind of boxes. Women tend to be more open about their emotional relationship with food. In fact, men don't call emotional eating. They call it stress eating. Because typically, in our society, men aren't allowed to be emotional. That's why it's wonderful to have situations that we're seeing today, places like Man Talks, where men can actually be real and be a whole man. The 4 quadrants, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, in their masculine and incorporating the natural feminine. You see, one of the things that I learned about sugar addiction is that it's actually not so much about the drugs, the drug of sugar. It's actually more about disconnection. Okay, the number one cause that's universal amongst all addictions is disconnection. And so part of the process of becoming whole again and developing a healthy relationship with food was to get connected. So who here would say and feel very confident to stand up in front of everyone and say, I have an amazing body? Great. Okay. I've seen a few in the crowd. This is not a typical crowd. Usually when I used to do this in Australia, I lived in Australia for 22 years, you'd always get the guy with the big beer battle going, yeah, I got an amazing body. Thank you, sir. You're right. Okay. But for those of you who didn't put up your hand, I have a few questions. Because a lot of times when we think about an amazing body, we tend to think of the pictures on the magazines. Well, I've consulted to many of the people on the magazines, the pictures in the magazines, the elite athletes, the celebrities in the world. And I want to tell you something. You can be just as unhealthy in a thin body as you can in an overweight body. And this is really important, very hard for some people to understand. So I'm going to say it again. You can be just as unhealthy in a thin body as you can in an overweight body. Because it's not only the volume that you put into your body that puts stress on it, it's the quality of what you're putting on and putting in your body. So when I refer to an amazing body, it can mean so many different things. Who here would agree that vision is absolutely amazing? Okay. What about being able to hear the sound of your favorite music, the voice of the person you care the most in the world saying, I love you? Okay. The ability to talk, laugh, feel, love. Absolutely amazing, isn't it? So respectfully, I would say that you all have amazing bodies, right? Wouldn't you agree? So what I'd like you to do is turn to the person next to you and respectfully say, looking them in the eyes, excuse me, I hope you don't mind my saying, but you have an amazing body. Okay. Woo. So, just so you know, the respectful thing, none of this Me Too stuff going on, okay? So men, I hope you don't feel disrespected. The women telling you have amazing bodies. Okay, so here's the thing. We all know we have amazing bodies. We all know we only have one for life. How are you fueling it? How are you treating it? Are you the CEO of your own body and life? Does your body get the best nutrition, or does it get what's left over when you've just run out of time and you're absolutely starving? Are you obsessing over it so much that you no longer have a natural and healthy relationship with food? You see, what I learned about nutrition is that most people are confused, and we're confused because we started to not treat food like the human species has treated food for millennia. We no longer have a natural world to live in and a natural relationship with food. So the first thing you need to do to develop a healthy relationship to food is understand how the human species is meant to eat. Okay, we have a species-specific way of eating, and there is no one way to eat. In fact, biodiversity of the planet depends on us not all eating the same thing. You see, nature tells us what to eat and the quantities to eat it in by how easily it's obtained in nature. That which is most abundant we're meant to have most of: air, water, vegetation. Even vegetation has a breakdown and a hierarchy of how we're meant to be eating. Okay, if I give you a piece of fruit versus a piece of a vegetable to grow, a seed to grow it, and you're hungry and you have to feed your family, you're going to grow the vegetable, because the fruit usually takes years to develop and grow and bear fruit. And even if it doesn't, even if it's already established, the vegetables seasonally will grow way more often and faster than the fruit does. Okay, there's this whole hierarchy. If something is difficult to find in nature, nature tells us to eat less of it. If it's harder to obtain, nature says eat less of it. And it gives us stronger physiological desires, so we work harder for it. And the last area is that if you cannot get it in nature, not only is it harmful to you, it's harmful to your body and the planet. So what's good for the planet is good for the body, and what's good for the body is good for the planet. And this is really hard for anyone who's out marketing supplements in big packages and foods that you could not make in nature. Even though they're marketed as healthy, if it has a downside to the environment, it has a downside to your body. And I know some of these concepts are challenging for people to understand. But once you start to understand that we have a natural relationship with food and our planet and our body, and we get connected to that, we start to understand ourselves, others. We are a social species. We are meant to eat together. I'd rather have a greasy bowl of noodles with people who are kind, loving, and positive than to have the most gourmet, nutritiously prepared meal with people who are angry, depressed, and negative. Saying that, it's incredibly powerful to share something that is nourishing, energizing, protective, that it's prepared well, so it tastes good, and share that with people who you love and care for, and who love and care for you. And when we start to do this as a culture, as a species, and we start to reconnect to what it is we're meant to be eating on this planet, we're going to have a different relationship to food, our body, and our purposes in life. Because if you want to get messed up about meaning and purpose and emotional issues that are going on, I've got a tool for you. It's called Eat a Lot of Sugar. And if you want to get connected to it, ditch the lethal recipe, refined sugars, oils, salts, grains, chemicals, and just start to eat slow, seasonal, local, organic, and whole. And share that food. Learn to cook. Because no matter what your philosophy is on the planet nutritionally, every well-educated expert will agree getting into the kitchen is one of the biggest and most effective changes you can actually make to developing a healthy relationship with food, your body, and the planet. Even people like Brett Wilson, who's a billionaire, who could hire a chef to cook him whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted. When I was working with him, I got him in the kitchen cooking real food. Why? Did I think that he was all of a sudden going to be making almond milk every day? As he was peeling the almonds, he looked at me and I said, I know what you're thinking. He said, you don't know what I'm thinking. I said, yeah, I know what you're thinking. He said, no, you don't know what I'm thinking. I said, yeah, I do. He said, okay, what am I thinking? I said, you're thinking there's no fucking way I'm ever going to peel an almond again. He said, yeah, you know what I'm thinking. But I'll tell you, he had a very different relationship his second time going through cancer to food and what he was putting into his body because of those lessons. And when you ask him today, what's the number one thing you should do if you get cancer? He'll say, stop eating sugar. So I have an audacious goal in the world. I want to get 1 million people to beat sugar addiction plus. And I want them to do it by developing a healthy relationship with food, their body, and the planet, and by connecting with each and every one of the people that make a difference and are important in their life. Because I know the difference it can make in every facet of your life. So I've got a 7-day challenge to get sugar-free. If you want to take it, I'll give it to you for free. Andy's not happy because I charge for it normally, and he gets paid by me. But if you give me your card or your email address, I will be happy to gift that to you, no pressure. And I hope and wish for you to have the most beautiful life that you can possibly have in the most amazing body I see you're all living in. Thank you.